Welcome to Uncovered. I am Jared Kimber. He is Bayram Kazi. You can follow him at Def Mango. You can follow me around the streets if you can find me. We are going to be talking about the cricket this week, as we always do on Uncovered, and I suppose as we always do all the time on everything I do. This is a cricket channel, as far as I'm aware. I was at the Island Test, and so it was a weird atmosphere because the last time I went to an England test, everyone expected Ireland to get smashed in the face. And of course, Ireland start that test match with, one of the more bizarre beginnings to a test match we'll ever see. So everyone gets really, really excited. And even as over time, England quite clearly worked their way back into that game, I don't think there was ever a feeling of, wow, they shouldn't be here or anything else. Whereas this time, the whole thing was so bizarre because they started the test match by basically Andy Balbirnie saying the quiet bit out loud, which is, we don't really prepare for red ball cricket that much anymore. And which is also remarkable to say because they've actually played more test matches in the last, few months than they've ever played in their entire run. But he was honest and he said, we don't really prepare for it. The major, tournament is obviously the World Cup. We've got this weird test match in the middle before we head off to Zimbabwe for qualifiers. The whole thing was really, really weird, but they also unquestionably got the worst of the conditions, right? Like Graham Hume bowling 124 km/h outswingers would have done a lot better if they'd won the toss and been bowling at the start rather than later on. But it did feel a little bit flat, maybe compared to some of the other island test matches that I've seen. That's my third one I've been to. Obviously, watched a couple on TV as well. But I think it was Nasser Hussain who said that the difference between, the top teams and the lower teams has never been wider. And I was thinking, but Ireland didn't even exist. Like, if you really want to be honest, Ireland's a lot closer to England now than they were 20 years ago. So it was a weird way of thinking about it. But the fact that Adair and McBride made runs, I think at the very least allowed Ireland to get out of it with, their trousers around their waist rather than around their ankles.
Yeah, I think they did salvage a bit of pride over there when Adair and McBride scored those runs towards the end and got a 300 plus score. And I think you put it nicely when you said they had the worst of the conditions because winning the toss would have helped, right? And
they may still
bowling
have
first.
lost. I mean, sorry,
Yeah,
they definitely still would have lost. We're not saying that they would have won, but they would have had the better of the conditions, so they might have looked better.
Absolutely. And if they had bowled to England first, maybe if they got them out at a sub 200 score or something like that, they would have dared to dream or hope like they did last time. And I think also a little bit of lack of experience in that lineup this time around. Kevin O'Brien isn't around anymore. He was a big part of Ireland's initial few test matches, particularly the one against Pakistan, their debut test. He scored a ton and they nearly won that one as well, by the way, after having been imposed a followed on.
Well, this time they didn't follow on, but it was very similar, right? In that the game was gone, and that's when they made the runs and came back. The difference was that they were never going to get 150 in front or 200 in front and make England nervous, which is exactly what happened in Malahide in that first game against Pakistan.
Yeah. And then they had a few debutants, of course. Finn Hand, I believe, debuted, and also his maiden wicket was almost a fumble, cotton bowled, and then he got a hand to it, right? So the irony is not lost over there. But I think they missed some senior seamers like maybe Timmy Murtagh would have fared well, especially if they had bowled first. And also, I would just have Josh Little in there. The left arm angle would have helped, even if, he doesn't have all of that red ball experience. Who does have so much red ball experience anyway?
It wasn't about experience. It was, they didn't pick him essentially because he was being rested for the World Cup qualifiers, right? And look, I think it would have been unfair to think that if Josh Little plays, Ireland are in a much better position in this game.
That's fair.
Having said that, he's probably going to be their best red ball bowler. So, that whether he is now or not, I don't know. But you probably want him to play at Lords as much as possible. So yeah, I do think not having Little and Tim Murtagh is still playing right for Middlesex, and so
absolutely not too far away from the Lords. Actually, at Lords.
He's the expert.
Right?
He was the one who took the wickets in.
Why not have him in the squad?
Yeah. So, his retirement caused a problem. Obviously, I did think about this because a lot of people were saying it was a poor bowling attack. And look, I get it. Andy McBride is, not quite on the level of, he's close to being a test match spinner, but he's not on the level of, most of the other off spinners we see regularly in the world, Mahid Hassan and Nathan Lyon and Ashwin. Obviously, he's nowhere near those kinds of levels. But if you really do, what's the best way of putting it? But you could make a very, very solid argument that their two best seamers, one was retired and one was being rested. And Markader is such a fascinating cricketer to me. I spent a lot of time talking to the Irish media this week, and they were sort of saying Markader's not very good. I said, well, Markader's best ball is about as good as anyone's best ball in world cricket. When he bowls a really good ball, it's like, because he's got good pace and his movement is insane. The problem is that his next ball is quite often his worst ball, right? And for a guy who is a swing bowler who can swing the ball both in and away, right, who's very skillful, he's not very accurate. And he bowls a lot of bad balls, and he got punished early on. And if you had Little, and you just said to Little, okay, Graham Hume hasn't worked here, and Markader's got smashed a little bit. We just need you to come in and just bowl back of the length for a couple of overs and just settle us down. That's a big difference between that and Fionn Hand, right? Who, as you said, was that his second or third first-class game? I don't think he's played a lot.
Something like that.
I'm not sure he's a specialist bowler, if we're being completely honest. I think he's probably a very good fifth bowler, but they didn't have a choice, right? That was what they were left with. And I thought their batting probably underperformed. I thought their bowling was just not good enough overall.
Yeah, I mean, they also, I feel, lacked an enforcer, right? Someone like Boyd Rankin would have been good in this Irish test team.
All of the retired players they used to have would have been really good here. I mean, I made that joke during the test on our Discord channel where I said, basically, if you had Little, Boyd Rankin and Tim Murtagh, with this batting lineup and Andy McBride bowling a little bit off spin and Curtis Campher, you'd be thinking, well, that's not a bad attack. It may not win you a test, but it'll keep you in it. And then you look at this attack and you're like, I mean, Graham Hume, I think he's got a bowling average of like 18 or 19 in first-class cricket over the first 5 years of his career. And on Cricinfo, it lists him as fast-medium, right? No one who's seen him bowl now is thinking he's fast-medium. There was a time when I thought Ben Duckett was facing him and he could have stopped, looked down and plucked the ball out with his hand and just thrown it back. When you're a kid bowling to like a senior player in the nets and they're just like, I'm not even going to face that. Sorry, that's not.
Well,
that's not.
He's a big, stocky fellow, so he might intimidate you with the looks. I mean, there's that possibility.
Yeah. No, there's a lot of muscle on him.
Yeah, absolutely. And just a bit on England, Josh Tongue debuted, and they have a bit of a crisis. We'll get to the injury crisis, but Josh Tongue has been included for the first two tests in the Ashes now. You saw him live. He took a fifer on debut in the second innings. What do you make of him?
Yeah, I remember seeing Josh Tongue. Maybe 2018, 2019, and I saw one of his games, and I thought, he's got a windmill action. Do you know what I mean when I say windmill action? Does everyone know? No, it's a windmill action. It's not. There aren't many of them left in cricket, so it's not something you talk about. But someone like Sohail Tanvir, where it's almost like both of their arms are moving in a similar direction at the same time. Liam Plunkett had a little bit of a windmill action, maybe slightly more traditional, but Josh Tongue has that, and then he has this thing where he like falls over and almost bowls across himself like that. It's a dramatic bowling action from that kind of point of view. And it was funny because during the test, I went down to Beckenham to talk to Marnus Labuschagne. And, I sort of said, you faced Josh Tongue before. It's a bit of a weird action. Is he hard to pick up? Because James McCullum was not picking him up at all. There were when Tongue was bowling full, James McCullum wasn't seeing the ball. Some of his shots were so bizarre. And I said to Marnus, has he ever weird action? And Marnus said, for him, it was a bit like facing Scott Boland, which I thought was remarkable because they're nothing like each other the way that we think about cricket. But when you break it down, you do understand what Marnus was saying. They both basically bowl from a slight angle coming in at you at all times. I thought he bowled well, and he took wickets, and I think he'd been averaging over 40 in first-class cricket coming in to in this year. So from that perspective, I thought England obviously saw something in him, but if they think he's going to be an enforcer against better batters, I just don't see that happening. The fact that Andy McBride and Markader didn't really worry too much about the short ball, I think tells you that he's just not quite quick enough to bowl that role. And I've seen England do this before where they pick someone to come in and bowl the short stuff who just isn't that fast. And I worry for two reasons. One, I just think that's surely not what he does in first-class cricket, right? And the second thing I worry about is that's how you injure bowlers who are not used to it, right? If you're Neil Wagner and that's like your raison d'etre, I think it's fine. I thought because of the angle that he comes in on, this weird, because he bowls quite close to the stumps, but the ball still comes from wider. I do think that he could have success against players who haven't seen much of him before. He got up to 91 miles an hour at one stage, but he was mostly around 86, 87 miles an hour. I don't think he's quite at the level they want to be Mark Wood, Ollie Stones, or Joff Archer's backup. But
You meant Ollie Robinson, didn't you? You messed up your Ollies again.
No, I meant Ollie Stone that time.
Oh, you
that
did
time
mean
I
Ollie
was right.
Stone.
Yeah. So what I meant is he's not. Those are the guys who are in the side to be quick because they're quick.
Right.
They're all
Enforcers.
quicker than him, right? And I think that he's not quite at their pace. We saw that with Mahmood as well when they brought Mahmood in, and you're just like, yeah, he's quick for first-class cricket, but he's not quite quick for Test cricket. And I think that Josh Tongue is very similar. Oh, by the way, I was calling Josh Tongue Gavin Tongue for the first half of the Test match because there was a Gavin Tongue who played for the West Indies, and I'm the only person who remembers Gavin Tongue as well. Anyway, so yeah, I don't think he's quite the player they were hoping he would be, which is maybe that little bit quicker. Weirdly enough, the stuff that I don't think they brought him into the side for, which was the ball movement, the unorthodox way he releases the ball, all these sorts of things, I actually thought might hold up, but. Yeah, I don't know where my current depth chart of English seamers are, but I wouldn't have him in my top 10 of English seamers. But with all the injuries and the sorts of people they're trying to replace, maybe he had, maybe they want that kind of thing. We have seen them. We saw it in New Zealand, and we've seen it over and over again. If Ben Stokes can't come in and bowl bouncers, and they don't have someone else in the team to do that, it's actually a big part of their tactics. Think back to Jasprit Bumrah's world record over and all those sorts of things. So the way they come into Test matches really does need someone who can just bowl bouncer after bouncer, especially to the lower order. Tongue did that, but I didn't think he did it in a way. I mean, Mark Adair's probably in the best batting form of his life, and obviously, no one's a bigger fan of Andy McBride's batting than I am, but the fact that they look so comfortable against it doesn't make me feel that comfortable going ahead with Josh Tongue as a quick bowler, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, if the Aussies get to face him, they might be licking their lips, pun intended. But anyway, some positives for England as well, of course. Brody picked up a fifer, which is fairly staple in the English summer. And then Pope got a double. Duckett nearly got a double. Crawley and Root got runs. Do you think that this was good practice before the Ashes, particularly given that now they are very, very depleted going into this Ashes?
Yeah, they are. I mean, we'll talk about that later. It's really, really interesting. But I think it's a competitive game. So unless they were going to play their A side, I wonder how they would have got, any warm up for the Ashes properly. This is this is probably better than them all going back to county cricket. I think it's probably a better warm up for their bowlers than it is for their batters, only from a point of view of, and their bowlers may not play in the Ashes, of course, which is a bit weird, but only from the point of view that Lorcan Tucker and Harry Tector, I mean, usually I would add Andy Balbirnie, but he barely batted in this Test match. Paul Sterling, Curtis Campher, they are. You have to get them out. They, well, not always in this case, but they're good batters. There's high quality skill there. I think the bowlers, like Graham Hume, is not warming up Ben Duckett or Ollie Pope. But as I said, Mark Adair's best ball is very, very good. But Andy McBride is at least another off spinner like Nathan Lyon. So there's some stuff there. So I don't think it was a terrible warm up, but it's also probably not. Perhaps if they had Josh Little, even that one extra bowler, it's slightly different, right? And then they have the ability to put a little bit more pressure on it. From an England perspective, it actually would have been far better if they if they'd lost the toss, they batted when the ball was moving around a little bit everywhere. And they had the chance to go, to bat from a position of weakness, right, rather than a position of strength. But look, it's really interesting. I've done a couple of podcasts with Nathan Johns about whether Ireland should have played this test altogether with the World Cup qualifiers coming up, which is a really interesting topic. That's the point that we are in cricket, where you now are like, should we be playing this test match at Lord's? Lorcan Tucker, I thought, was really, really interesting. And as you said, Brody taking his wickets and a couple of the batters making runs. I don't think it's ever a negative for Duckett and Pope to make runs at Lord's. In a
Crawley to get tons of runs on the inside edge. There's that as well.
Yeah. Oh my God, the amount of times that he got an inside edge. I've never seen him do that often before. Like usually he's the outside edge king. That is something worth looking at going forward, because I did honestly wonder if that's what was going on, if he was trying to cover the outside edge and he started getting inside edges. But that's for another day. But yeah, look, it's disappointing for Ireland, I think, but they fought back and probably saved some face. They got to play in packed Lords over a couple of days. It didn't rain. There was a lot of good things from that perspective. But we're going to take a break. Remember, we've probably got a few topics today, but if you have a super chat and you are desperate for us to answer it, please put it down or put it in the comments or whatever the super chat thing is. We're going to take a quick break here, and then after the break, we will be back. We'll be talking a little bit about the World Test Championship final.
Let me tell you a story. When I was a kid, people would ask my dad if he wanted me to be Viv Richards, and he always said no, he wanted me to be Boycott, because apparently he liked boring things. But anyway, it turned out I could be neither. But thanks to Bodyline t-shirts, I can wear clothes showing both players. The Boycott Stick of Rhubarb is one of my favourite t-shirts. I really like the design. And it's not the only one I love. There's also a WG Grace one where he's in a pedalo, which is a part of my everyday wardrobe now. But there are heaps of other cool shirts on this site, and you can search for them by nations or type, and they seem to add to them all the time. I'm a big fan of the Court Marsh Bold Lily in the Australian collection, and there's also a lovely Morning Everyone in honour of Richie Benaud's great greeting. The English area has the Fast Leg Theory shirt, which I think is a ripper. There's a couple of great West Indian ones I love, including this simple Viv Richards design, and a couple of Capel Dev t-shirts in the Indian section that I simply must have. I'm not saying that Bodyline t-shirts will have something that you will like, but I will say this: they got me to wear a Jeffrey Boycott inspired t-shirt. And that in itself is a minor miracle.
Welcome back to Uncovered, Jared and Bayram. Let's talk World Test Championship final. If you're listening to this on a podcast, you've already heard me and Bayram go through it a little bit, but that was mostly me answering Bayram's questions, so I might as well ask him some questions. You're a little bit fascinated with the fact that Saha is not over there. So I went through it today. So Saha, I'm trying to remember if he didn't help them win a test, but there was a test against New Zealand that they got themselves in a little bit of trouble with. They ended up drawing that test. They got New Zealand 9 wickets down. Saha made 60. So he's had success with the bat in this cycle. He obviously, they're probably going to go with Bharat, is my guess. And most of the 11s I've seen have Bharat's name there. I think we actually even had a comment from someone asking about Ishan Kishan. And is this it?
Let me check.
Gamma says, is it better to have an attacking batter like Kishan over a proper wicketkeeper like KS Barrett to strengthen the batting? What do you think is a better option? So a lot of people are talking about this. Just on that particular question, I'll answer this before I throw it to you, is they both average 38 in first-class cricket. It's really interesting that they are seen as two different kinds of player, Ishan Kishan and KS Barrett, when their records would suggest they're a little bit more similar to that. We know that Ishan is obviously a lot more attacking. You like the idea of Saha coming in. That's partly because we know what Saha can do, right? And you're thinking it's a final. You're better off to have a player like that in a final than Barrett, who's only played a couple of tests, and Ishan, who hasn't played any, has he?
Yeah, I don't think he has. He has not earned his Indian Test cap yet, from what I recall. You can probably check that whilst I answer this.
I'm literally you talk, and I'll make sure that I'm right. I'm pretty sure we're right. Yeah, hasn't played.
I'm quite sure as well. Yeah, there you have it. And I think where that selection call probably comes from is that Rishabh Pant was an attacking player. So, hey, let's try to do a like for like over here. But it doesn't work in my head, at least, because Ishan Kishan plays in the top order in limited overs cricket. And he hasn't quite cemented a place in that team either. So to throw him in a World Test Championship final, that sounds absurd to me. Because had they included Saha and Bharat as the two options and then gone for Bharat, I would have been fine with that. I would be like, okay, they probably trust him more. They have the coaching staff has eyes on these players, and they probably feel that KS Bharat is more prepared to face this challenge. But with Ridham and Saha, you get tons of experience. I cannot recall how many test matches he has played, but he's played a lot of test matches. This is a one-off game. It's not a series. You don't have to hand him out a central contract or tie him down for like the future or anything. You can use his services right now and then look towards the future. And why I thought that, he could be a very, very valuable inclusion is because India haven't been very good in finals, have they, in the last 10 years? They have struggled big time. And on these sorts of occasions, that experience matters. Those nerves matter. It might be a situation where they have to grind, a session out or something.
Well, and just on Saha and finals, in two IPL finals, he's made 100 and a 50. And those were the two IPL finals he lost. So you might want him in the team, but you probably want him in to fail rather than succeed.
Yeah, no bad juju over there, I suppose. But he clearly has been in the system for a long time, and he has had more exposure than KS Bharat. And I think exposure counts for something at this level. And I think he is the best keeper out of these three. And one mistake could cost you big time on these sorts of occasions in these sorts of games.
Yeah.
And India want to get over that hoodoo, right? They lost the World Test Championship final last time. They're in it again this time. And if we look at the past 2 years, they are arguably the best test side in terms of numbers. I think barring that series versus South Africa, in which Kohli started screaming at the stumps, they haven't really lost a test series, have they? So they really need to win this. And with Virat Kohli, at least when he was captain, there was a very, very strong focus on test cricket. You would hear this all the time, that we want to give test cricket the most importance. It is the pinnacle of the sport. So just keeping all of that in mind, I think this might be an occasion too big for KS Bharat. I'm not doubting his ability. I think that might have helped with having Saha in the team, particularly because you're without Bumrah and Pant, who have been your two main match winners in the past. But then again, this is India, and Rahane is back for the experience. Maybe he can make up for Saha's, perhaps. Maybe that's a solution to this.
That's where I think it's interesting, because Rahane, I know form is part of the reason he's back. Obviously, he started making runs in the Ranji Trophy, and couple of double hundreds and a 190 odd, and he's made runs everywhere else, including the IPL. So he clearly looks like he's in more form than we've seen in a while. But the one thing I would say is that if they were willing to bring him back as an experienced player, then Saha would make sense. It doesn't. I don't think it bothers me as much as it bothers you. But one thing I would say on your, to go along with your point, is that I'm pretty sure the ECB did a study. I think someone else in cricket might have done a study as well on the experience levels of World Cup winning teams. And it generally is that the more experienced you are, the more likely you are to win a World Cup, which is, I think, sometimes why teams turn up at World Cups with very, very old players, and everyone's like, why are they bringing these guys? But it's because of that. This guy's played 25 25 high pressure games and 150 one-dayers. And yes, they might average 5 less than their replacement, but we know exactly what we're going to get from them in a big game, we assume. All those sorts of things do play a part. So I do find that interesting. The other big interesting part of this is the oval pitch itself. So it does have, as far as English wickets go, it does certainly have a reputation of being a spin-friendly wicket. And,
Yasir Shah got a 10 for.
Yasir Shah got a 10 for. I'm trying to think if Jadeja took wickets when India won. I think he might have as well. But the thing is that the majority, and, we've seen Graham Swan do very well there at times.
Yeah.
We've seen overseas spinners sometimes come in and do well. But those test matches are usually played in August and sometimes even September. It's early June. It's not just June. It's early June. And I do wonder, I think Kartikeya wrote a piece today, and this, I've been thinking this myself. And a lot of people have asked me, but I'll tell you why this is specifically hard to answer from a data point of view. But we were wondering if the reason that the oval spins a lot is probably just it gets used a lot as a pitch, and by the end of the year, it gets a little bit more tired and a little bit more dusty. Because I've been to a lot of early season matches where the seam bowlers have dominated at the oval. It's probably the first class venue I've seen the most cricket at in the world. And yes, spinners can do very well there, but I've seen them do very well towards the end of the year. I remember Murali Kartik and Gareth Batty bowling. They were both basically unplayable when, I think it was, I'm trying to remember if they won the county championship that year, or maybe they got promoted. I can't remember what it was, but they were unplayable on that surface. Though, two test quality spinners, absolutely unplayable. But I've seen plenty of other times where spinners have looked very benign on that wicket. And the reason that it's hard to work out is specifically because in first-class cricket, you usually get an extra day of the pitch degrading, which means that spinners come into all surfaces in a way in Test cricket, in which they don't always come into in first-class cricket, especially in places like England and New Zealand. So, if you're in New Zealand domestic cricket, you probably don't always, or traditionally anyway, you probably didn't always need a spinner. Whereas New Zealand Test cricket, you probably do, because you need to rest everyone a little bit longer and the pitch will degrade that little bit more. This is what's interesting about this oval. We can go back and look at the stats of first-class games in the oval in June, and I'm sure someone will. I thought about it, and then I thought I'd rather not. But and the reason I thought rather not is because we're going to be looking at 4-day games, right? And it is a slightly different thing. The extra 20% is a massive change of how you prepare a pitch, what happens, how many people run on the pitch, right, throughout the game. All those things do change. And so we really don't know how this will go from that perspective. And also the other thing is it's a neutral, right? So we don't know if the groundskeeper might be thinking, wow, I want to keep both teams interested here. Maybe I'll give a little bit of extra pace and bounce, keep a little bit of extra pace and bounce, but then I'm going to have it on days 3, 4, and 5 where the spinners come back in to see if they want to play Jadeja and Ashwin. It's such an unknown variable. It's really fascinating to me.
I think as far as the curators are concerned, they would be focused on getting a result, because it's a final
they've
and
got
that
6
should
days,
be imperative.
don't they?
Yeah, that they have as well.
So maybe they don't have to focus as much on a result as you normally would. But I do get your point.
Yeah. Well, I saw a picture that Dinesh Karthik retweeted or posted, and it was off the oval surface that will be used. And that is as grassy and green a track as you'll ever see. So definitely a bowl first wicket. And where this will get interesting is that prior to actually looking at a picture of that, surface, I thought that India will go for 2 spinners. I thought they will use Jadeja for the balance that he provides in the team, and Ashwin because of his experience. And last time Ashwin toured England, he got wickets as well. That is an important little, bit of information in this that India will be looking at. And then you've got seamers, right? You've got Siraj and Shami who are definitely going to play. And then you were going to think about maybe Umesh or Unadkat, who I did not see playing, but Umesh was probably the more, rational sort of player that they were, or bowler that they were going to go for. But now, after looking at that wicket, I think they might not play Jadeja. They might play Shardul Thakur ahead of Jadeja, and that might just mess things up.
Surely they'll play Jadeja for the batting.
Yeah, they should. I mean, let's see. Maybe they go for
I can't
Ashwin's
imagine
bowling.
Jadeja's not playing. He should be first name on the team sheet. I mean, Ashwin is the way that goes. But no, I mean, I understand what you're saying. I'm having a look at the picture that Dinesh Karthik put up. It is quite green. What I would say is this. When did he send this? 2 hours ago. So, yeah, okay. We've got a little while before. I've seen so many pictures of test match grounds 2 days before where the pitch looks bright green. Everyone gets really freaked out and worried. And then by the time the game actually starts, the pitch looks okay. And if you do look at that pitch, there are little patches of brown underneath the grass. So perhaps when it's shaved, perhaps when it dies off, when it's rolled or whatever, it won't be as much. So what I would say is, if I was involved with Indian cricket, and Rahul Dravid will know this, he doesn't need, I'm sure he's listening, obviously, but he'll know this, that you can't overreact to what it looks like at the moment. But yeah, no, the Indian lineup is really interesting because Australia don't really have a choice, right? They maybe have a choice between Nisa and Boland if they.
That's the only choice they have, I think.
And I don't
think
think
every other position is locked down.
Yeah, and I don't think that's a choice. I think Boland will just play ahead of Nisa just because he's played more Test cricket and taken more wickets and is more like Josh Hazelwood. But they don't really have any choices. Where India, and I've said this before, I think India are actually really, really fascinating from this point of view, is because of Jadeja, and you can even throw Ashwin and Shardul and Akshar, because of the all-round ability of some of those players. They have such flexibility in their lineup, which means that you have the ability to get things so correct. The problem with that, of course, also comes in on the other side, which is if you make a mistake by making too many changes, everyone's going to absolutely have a go at you. There's almost like you either win the game or you make a change, and everyone will focus in on that change, despite the fact that may not be why you lost the game. So it is quite interesting from that point of view. Any other thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think what India would be focusing on in this game in particular is that they don't want to lose this game in half an hour. They've done that twice in their last 2 finals, semi-finals in the 29 World Cup versus New Zealand, and then also the test match versus New Zealand 2 years back. I think they lost both of those games in very short period of time, Like, they could have made a fist out of it, and they did make a fist out of it, especially in the World Cup semi. But it's just that flurry of wickets cost them, and they really would not want that. And I think they have the players to do this, Rohit Sharma has an impeccable record in England. Shubman Gill is young, but he's sprightly, and he'll be eager to get runs. Pujara has been playing in England for nearly 1.5, 2 years, and he's been captaining Sussex. And I think his experience in this test match will be absolutely imperative. Kohli, not in the best of form, but of course he's still Kohli. So they have the players for this, right? But they just can't let that half an hour or hour of play cost them the game again, because it is an issue with India. Their bilateral record is great, but when it comes to tournaments for the last decade, they haven't won anything. 2013 Champions Trophy is the last time we saw them lift a trophy. So this is big in Indian cricket, and this test championship matters a lot. To Virat Kohli, this will matter a whole lot, I think, more than other players, because he's just been so vocal about his love and support for test cricket. So
if you think about Virat at the moment, his legacy outside of his batting is RCB and India not winning when he was either in charge or the main person, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes that just happens. That is not necessarily down to, oh, Virat Kohli's terrible or Virat Kohli's great. And, I've explained his captaincy many times before, but it doesn't matter. That's not how narratives work, right?
Maybe him and AB bond over that.
Yeah, narratives don't. Well, AB's a perfect example. Chris Gayle is another example, right? Chris Gayle won 2 World Cups and people still thought of him as a failure, right? These things happen. The only other thing I was going to say is I've just done I've gone through India's entire World Test Championship cycle. I've gone through Australia's as well. There'll be pieces up on that, in the next 24 hours or so. The one thing I noticed going through India's was how rarely they had very big partnerships in this period. So they had a couple of hundreds. So KL Rahul hit a couple of very important hundreds. Rohit Sharma hit a couple of very important hundreds. Rishabh Pant made 100 that almost won them a test in South Africa. Hundreds weren't a problem. Right? They came, it was very rare to see their top order have partnerships together of over 100, 150 runs. So even when they made 400, 450, 500 in some cases, there was a lot of like smaller scores. It wasn't like one guy made 100 and the other guy made 250 or anything like that. That is, I think, where, when you were talking about before, them losing wickets in clusters, what they have been doing over a long period of time is consistently losing wickets. And I do think that is an issue. And it's also something, specifically an issue against a team that I think Australia, I think this is right. Every Australian bowler, including Cam Green, in the World Test Championship cycle, had a bowling average under 30. So Cam Green's was 29. I'm trying to remember someone, Boland's was obviously -4. So they're wicket takers, right? And that's going to be a really, and whether this pitch is as green as it is or not, I think I looked it up the other day, and the average so far at the Oval this year has been 30 runs per wicket, quite low, not massive, not like scary low, but low. Generally at the Oval, the average is 32 runs per wicket. Right, so that is a bit of a drop this year, and that's probably because it's usually July and August when batting becomes a little bit easier at the Oval. Specifically, you could say that about the whole country, but it seems to that surface seems to firm up even more. So no, there's lots of interesting stuff, and obviously next week we'll probably just be talking about this game. So
I just think that with respect to India, they do have a good chance, but Australia's bowling attack is relentless, even without Hazelwood. Either of those guys play, Boland or Neser. Neser's been playing for Glamorgan, getting wickets, scoring runs, and Scotty Boland averages 13.5. So these guys aren't easy, and they aren't going to give India a lot of space to breathe. And I think that if I look at this objectively, I know I said in a podcast yesterday that India are going to get 35 all out and Scotty Boland is going to get a 7. But if I'm being serious about this, I would still think that Australia are favorites to win it. But this matters a lot to India, particularly for Kohli and Sharma, because their legacy kind of depends on it, And this is going to be a massive win if they pull this off. And they've done it before. Depleted India have depleted, full strength Australia in Australia. So just a few facts over there. Obviously stoked for the game. And I'm really excited to see what lineup India plays, because Australia is pretty much ironed out. And Cam Green, I think, is someone who provides impeccable balance to Australia, which really helps them, as far as the team compositions are concerned.
So just on the bookies have Australia as massive favourites now, even when Hazelwood came out. So it's worth putting that out there as well, just so that everyone has it. I'm not sure I have them as massive favourites, but I certainly think Australia is the better team. And I think the injuries are going to affect India a lot more than they will Australia. We're on Uncovered. I'm Jared. He's Bayram. Here's a break.
A few years ago, I had a panic attack after ESPN Cricinfo made me their global writer. I'd earned that position, but I also felt like a fraud at the time because I didn't really understand how I wrote. I understand that there was a process and gears and different styles and things, but how it all came together felt a little bit random. And so I began to panic like a golfer with a natural swing, worried one day I'd just end up with the yips. And would my career be over? So I took my writing apart piece by piece until I understood it. And then I figured out I could teach others all the mistakes I had learned. So I started an online course where I tried to make it as cheap as possible so people like me would be able to afford it. It's called Fans with Laptops, and heaps of people from around the world have used it so far, from first-time writers all the way through to professionals trying to improve. I started with a simple plan to make each rider the best they could be. And from the feedback I've received over the years, it seems like the course does that. But after COVID, my career changed. I came to YouTube, started podcasts, wrote emails, and formed a new career on my own going forward. So I now had something else to offer, the multimedia side of things, social media and everything else. Not to mention that I was building everything up as an independent. And so I added all of that to my course. So if you have ever wanted to work in sports as a writer or podcaster or making videos or anything else, Fans with Laptops is the place to start. If you think you qualify as a fan and you have a laptop and you want to work in sport, click on the link.
Welcome back to Uncovered. Jared and Bayram here. Jack Leach is back. Do you know that actually, the way I just pronounced that sounded wrong because I said Jack Leach is back as if he's making a comeback, whereas actually what I mean, he's injured. Before we talk about his injury, have you ever heard of a man called Doug Ackley?
I have not.
I think it's Ackley or Ackley. I think it's Ackley. He's an Australian who is absolutely convinced that the front foot no ball law is the reason that bowlers get bad backs. That under the back foot no ball law, people didn't get backs because the same amount of pressure wasn't through the crease. And I kind of, from a physics perspective, agree with him. There are some things I don't necessarily agree with. Like I think when we bowled the back foot no ball, we were bowling a lot slower. So the pressure generally wasn't as big in that point of view. And the other thing was, in the old days, they would say he's got a sore back. And now we scan it and some, MRI imaging type, tomfoolery tells us that there's a fracture there, right? So I do think there are other issues beyond that, but his basic point is, so Jack Leach has a stress fracture to his back. He's out for the entire Ashes, probably for the rest of the year, I would think, depending on, I haven't heard an update since the first one yesterday, but I would assume he's out for a good period of time. It's very, very rare that finger spinners get this injury. It happens to wrist spinners a little bit. Obviously happens to seamers a lot. Daniel Vittori was one, and that was Doug that pointed that out to me on Twitter as well. But just such a setback for Jack Leach. I just feel like his whole career is like overcoming things. He wasn't exactly the sexiest player. He was, Moeen Ali was the person they were desperate to get in the team, not Jack Leach. He plays for Somerset, which I don't know what percentage of English cricket fans could find Somerset on a map. Although it's one of the cricket heartlands of England, weirdly enough. Crohn's disease.
Well, I mean, Viv played for Somerset, no?
Yeah. Even Viv doesn't know where it is. Crohn's disease, obviously, was something else he had to overcome. He got really sick. He got sepsis. They think he was one of the earlier people that had COVID. There's this theory, and it might just be English cricketers whispering, that they all had COVID, but they were all sick in South Africa in 2019-2020 series. They now think the reason they were sick was that they had COVID and didn't know that it was COVID at the time, of course. But the whole team got sick. They lost the test match against South Africa, basically, because they couldn't put out an 11 properly. He then had that period where he was traveling around as like professional 12th, just not even doing anything. He had to watch Dom Bess play over him. I mean, it's incredible. Dom Bess was playing ahead of Jack Leach, and Dom Bess is now averaging high 40s in first-class cricket over the last couple of years. Probably doesn't have a great future ahead of him, near future, unless something changes in his career. Leach just feels like all these things happen to him. And I would say since Bazball, he clearly changed his technique a little bit. I don't know who it was who worked with him, but he puts a little bit more action on the ball to get some drift, which means that you can't just smash him early on. Like people used to just treat him like he was a net bowler for the first couple of innings until the ball started spinning. You can't do that anymore. He's actually quite a clever bowler now on flat pitches in a way that he never was before. He finally gets to that point in his career and he gets a stress fracture. It just feels like no matter what Jack Leach does, something just drags him back into the muck.
Yeah, there are a few angles to this, right? I think the part where you mentioned where he's changed his technique a bit, he was very useful on the flat pitches of Pakistan.
Yeah.
And I think he had a pretty good tour. Even in this previous test match versus Ireland, I mean, he was tempting Sterling to sweep him. And then, Johnny Bairstow had an earful to say from behind the stumps. But yeah, he would get you those wickets, which would often break partnerships. And Jack Leach was just a useful control bowler to have, who can now also, get a wicket or two at times. And I think he brought a lot of value to England's team. And if I look at England's spinners after Graeme Swann and maybe Monty, there aren't a lot of names which would match Leach's achievements. You've got the Zafar Ansaris who are now studying or practicing law, and other players like Dom Bess. I mean, he was introduced in the Test team, had a little bit of success with the bat, actually, I think more than the ball. And yeah, he's completely out of the picture. Who else have you got? You've got Rehan. Rehan Ahmed could come in potentially.
I mean, Moeen Ali is the big one, right? So, you know, and there you have someone who, he's such a weird career on his own because he took really good wickets, but went at a ridiculously high run rate. And so when you talk about Leach getting to become someone who can take wickets and control the run rate, he probably is the first one to be able to do that since Swan. So even Moeen Ali couldn't necessarily do that. So yeah, I mean, they have struggled. You know, who have they used? They've used people like Kerrigan, Scott Borthwick. I think another one as well.
With a leggy maybe, because I can't think of another.
Parkinson came in.
Parkinson, I would love.
Liam Dawson.
Liam Dawson is someone who could really fill that gap well. I think in his last championship game, he got like a 6-for in an innings.
Did he?
And and he can provide good value with the bat as well. So he might be one of those guys England might be looking at.
I think that's what they'll do. I think they'll go. I think they'll go Will Jacks, Liam Dawson, someone like that. Even Rehan Ahmed, if they,
I wouldn't mind Rehan at all.
Yeah.
I think he does have what it takes, and he is going to be, the next Adil Rashid someday. He looks to be keen, when it comes to playing across formats. He's a good batter as well. Liam Dawson makes the most sense, I suppose. And I've thought about this, right? Because he has that experience. He's won a World Cup on the bench. And I mean, it's just going to be unfortunate overall not having Jack Leach, not just because, of course, all of the challenges that he's gone through with the injuries, the sepsis, Crohn's disease, but also because the last time Australia came to England, he won England a test match. He was there with Ben Stokes right till the end, bagged a Specsavers deal. I think his specs are free for life now. And that's just a great anecdote. And I think that he really, that was the point in his career that he started to believe, because you often talk to Jack Leach. It seems like he was one of those guys who never thought he'd take 100 test wickets. But now he had gotten to that point where he did believe, and that's why he is such a big blow to England. And I guess Dawson makes the most sense just because of like the profile that he brings.
Yeah, but I think Will Jacks is the other one, isn't he? Because Will Jacks, did he play in Pakistan?
So Will Jacks never ever got a fifer in red ball cricket before he toured Pakistan. Weirdly enough, Pakistan gave him a fifer. But I think he is more of a batting option as opposed to bowling option.
No, he definitely is. But I think because they have Joe Root, I think they might just think to the... look, to be honest, Dawson's more of a batting... Dawson's a batter in professional cricket.
Yeah.
It's just that when he plays for England, he gets used as a bowler. So... It probably depends on what you want. Dawson being the left arm finger spinner means that then they've got Root to bowl off spin as well to the left-handers if they want. But the other way they might look at it is there's already a bunch of left-handers in the Australian team. You might as well have two off spinners is a potential the way they go about that. But yeah, I it'd be interesting to see which direction they go. But I think they'll pick the extra batter because I don't really think any spinner they can pick is going to take enough wickets to change it with their wickets. They really want 15 overs to rest all their seamers, especially with Ben Stokes. It'd be interesting to see if Sam Curran plays a bigger part now as well because of that, and he comes in and adds a little bit of extra batting and everything else as well. So it'd be interesting to see how they rejiggle that. Afghanistan are playing Sri Lanka. Tell me, what do I need to know? I know it's happening, but that's all I know.
You need to know, for starters, that Rashid Khan isn't a part of this series thus far. I'm not sure if he's set to come for the last ODI or not. But the series is level 1-1. And without Rashid, Afghanistan first managed to restrict Sri Lanka to around 260 odd. And that too would have been fewer runs had it not been for Charitha Salanka, who scored 91. I think Dhananjaya scored a 50 in the lower order. So that's what got Sri Lanka to 268 or something. And then Afghanistan just came out and blew them away. They comfortably chased it down. And we know that Rahmat Shah has been getting runs for them at first drop, albeit not at a high strike rate, but he's been getting the runs for them. But what's most promising and the biggest takeaway, I think, for Afghanistan is that their opener, Ibrahim Zadran, who is 21 years of age, in 10 ODI games, has gotten 585 runs, which is the fifth most for any batter in ODI cricket after 10 games, which is amazing. I mean, this guy could go on to break Fakhar Zaman's record for quickest to 1,000 runs in ODI cricket. And he's gotten his 98 run a ball. So that's even more promising that he's not like eating up tons of deliveries. And I think what's super beneficial for Afghanistan is that they're getting to play in Hambantota, which might be a bit similar to what they'll experience in India. I'm not saying it'll be like completely similar, but it could be, there's going to be lots of crossover. It's weird that they're playing all those 3 games in Hambantota. It's like Afghanistan are touring Hambantota and that's it. But Sri Lanka bounced back, of course. I mean, they scored heaps of runs, 320 odd, and their top order fired. Nisanka scored runs. Karuna Ratne is playing ODI cricket. There's some news for you.
Yeah.
He scored a 50.
Didn't
and
expect
I
that to
can't
happen.
remember. Yeah, I think Kusal Mendes also got some runs that game. Everyone pitched in. Dhananjaya got like wickets as well, got some runs as well. Afghanistan capitulated, 190 odd. So what I'm learning from this series is that there's not a lot that separates both sides, but also both of those games have been one-sided. So that really sets us up nicely for the final in Hambantota. And biggest takeaway for Afghanistan, apart from Ibrahim Zadran, of course, and the runs he's scoring, is that they've got a win versus Sri Lanka at their backyard without Rashid Khan. They will have Rashid Khan in India, and that makes them all the more potent. So if Afghanistan can figure out a consistent way to get 270 to 80 odd in this World Cup, I would even expect them to win a match of 3.
Yeah, I think that's always been their thing. They usually have good enough bowling to keep people interested and occasionally do really, really well. It's that ability to consistently make a par score. I don't think we need them to make an above par score because their bowling is so good. But if they can make par scores and then occasionally a below par score, they'll be able to defend as well. But that is their biggest issue at the moment as a team. And let's just finish off. You said you had some news about Shaheen.
Yeah, so this has been doing the rounds.
As if I'd said the wrong thing. Is that just between you and me? You just wanted to tell me something.
No. You can definitely talk about this. I was just, talking to you about it earlier, and I'm completely happy to talk about it over here, is that there's a lot of discourse going on currently with respect to Shaheen Shah Afridi's workload, and for good reason as well. He got injured in the World Cup final. He was injured before that. He was rushed into the team. And even though he wasn't at 100%, he was operating at 80, 85. He was one of the key players for Pakistan in that World Cup campaign. And had he not injured his knee, who knows? Who knows, right?
It was a bit of a fluke injury as well, wasn't it? He was fielding the ball, wasn't he?
It's unfortunate because earlier in the year, that same year, he got injured fielding in Sri Lanka in a test match and then injured his knee again whilst he was fielding and after completing that catch in the final versus England. And even, with a foot that barely was working or whatever, he bowled a dot ball. So bowling, like just taking a few prods. So I understand the concern that everyone's having with respect to Shaheen. But then if he's bowled 27 overs in 10 days and played, 7 games or 7 T20s in 10 days, which does sound a bit ridiculous. Yes, if you ask me, that is a bit of T20 overload. But Shaheen needs some practice for Test cricket. Pakistan is set to tour Sri Lanka, and that is happening in July. So if he is not that sort of match fit where he has a lot of overs under his belt and is rearing to go, I think that's not beneficial either. So it's a catch-22 situation. And I think I would be more comfortable playing Shaheen right now just so he gets back into his rhythm because he's not back to peak Shaheen yet. He's, of course, Shaheen, even when he's not peak Shaheen, is really good, but we know what peak Shaheen is capable of. So I would want him to find that rhythm in the Vitality Blast and then go and win Pakistan a couple of test matches in Sri Lanka. But the worrying part in all of this is that Shaheen is also penciled in to play the 100. And I'm not sure if that's a great idea in a World Cup year because that's a lot of cricket.
It's interesting. I saw him bowl against Lancashire and he, I think it was during the IPL final. It was raining so much that Sky just put on the Blast game for later because I think they overlapped. He's not bowling particularly well. The ball wasn't coming out of his hand. So there is a part of me that thinks that, yes, it's a lot of cricket, and I can understand why people would be upset about that. But there is a part of me that thinks he probably just needs a couple more overs, a couple more deliveries to get back to whatever he's doing. He took 2 for 25 in the last game, and I think there was a game against Derbyshire where he bowled really well early on. I don't know how many overs he bowled in that.
Well, most importantly, he completely destroyed or obliterated Joss Butler's off pole. That's his biggest accomplishment. Apart from his batting, of course, he's an all-rounder now. Clearly, he gets or scores a lot of sixes.
Yeah. He made 29 in one game and 17 in the other. I'm just having a look at. He made runs against India in the World Cup.
He most recently made runs against New Zealand in an ODI, and then he also scored a 6 or something versus India in the World Cup.
Yeah,
a very, very
one
crucial
hit, but
6.
I remember it was a very important hit. Yeah. So
and for the Hawkalanders, he's scored runs plenty of times now. I think it's not even one of those things where you need to talk about it. But of course, he continues to add to his game, which is great for Shaheen. But ultimately, I get why people are worried. You want to wrap him in cotton wool because Shaheen, the bowler, is worth way more than Shaheen the anything else. right? Even though he's getting better at batting, he's a brilliant fielder. For fast bowlers, I think he's absolutely, amazing, puts his body on the line, which again, every time he does that, I think all Pakistanis, like, we have our hearts in our mouth. But again, like I said, catch-22 situation. I do agree that he needs a few more miles in those legs to, play a test match. But what if he gets injured playing all of this T20 cricket?
a lot of cricket.
And he's penciled in to play a lot.
Yeah, no, that's sure. You say his bowling's worth more than anything else. That's a little bit unfair on his hair because he could be a hair model, I think, going ahead. Just want to thank everyone in the comments. I'm not going to be able to get to them today, but thanks to Manav, Siddharth, Kumar, EGP, EKG, Punate, who else we got? Kultura, can't see that one. Tajaram, I think, as well. Gamma, Kushev, All Things Cinema Vodcast, Gamma, all those different people. So thank you to everyone. If you do want to ask a question on one of these shows, the best way, of course, is to super chat. If for no other reason, then it makes it easier for me to find.
There's one really interesting question. If you have like 2 minutes on you, I just want to address this.
I have 30 seconds. You better answer it quickly.
Yeah.
What was the question?
If Warner fails in the Ashes, does he get a farewell test versus Pakistan?
No.
Okay.
I think it's possible that Warner is not playing for Australia by the end of the Ashes. And to be fair, he was really honest in the press conference. He was saying, look, I'm going to tell you where I want to play my last games. The selectors may not agree. So the T20 one's the most interesting one because I would still say he probably should be Australia's opener unless something massively changes. Jeff Lemon was saying to me, someone could have a good big bash. And I was like, well, have a pretty good big bash to move David Warner out of the side. But that could happen as well. World Cup, ODI World Cup, I think is probably the only thing that I can't see any reason why he wouldn't play. But yeah, it's very possible he won't play against Pakistan. I think if he makes it home, because he makes so many runs at home, he'll be fine. But if he's not playing in the last couple of Ashes tests, I think that's probably it for David Warner as a test cricketer, would be my guess.
think Stuart Broad can answer that question in a couple of weeks' time.
Did you see when Warner was asked about Stuart Broad and he said, well, we're playing India first. So, we're a little bit more worried about, that was Mahbub. Who said that? He said, a little bit more worried about India at the moment, and then we'll be worried about it if Stuart Broad gets picked. And I did think it was funny. In fact, I've got to go, so I won't go too deep into it. But it's quite interesting that one of the biggest talking points of this series is Warner versus Broad. And there is a possibility that neither of them play all the test matches in the Ashes. But maybe we'll save that for when the Ashes actually comes around.
Yeah.
But you can find Bayram on Twitter at Def Mango. You can find him over at Grassroots Cricket for everything else. Plus, he's here like all the time. But thank you to everyone. Remember, get the super chats in if you want to support us on Patreon. That is also another great way of doing it. But bye for now, and I will be back in a couple of days to do Wagon Wheel, and we've got a Footmarks coming up as well. There's but mostly it'll be World Test Championship stuff, of which will start tomorrow from not the test match, but actually on this site. We'll see you again next time.
If you like what we are making here and you want to know if you can help out, well, you can. On top of asking super chats on our lives, you can also support us through Patreon or buy me a coffee. The more support we can get, the better and more videos we can make. On Patreon, there are plenty of other things we offer too, like a Discord server, the chance to ask questions directly, AMAs, and early versions of our recordings. This channel only exists because people like you help support it. We have to buy equipment, software, pay wages, and my mortgage, I suppose, just to make this stuff happen. And if you don't have any money available to spend, it isn't just your money we want. Shares, likes, retweets, comments, subscriptions, the little bell icon thing, all of it. They help us build and become more professional, make more videos, better videos, all that sort of stuff. So thank you for watching everything we make and for all your support so far.